You're listening to The World at 8 with Lynn Mozart. The World at 8, the number one in nationalist news.
Highlights of the news today, Wednesday the 4th of December 2013. Lee Rigby killers drove around Woolwich barracks looking for soldiers to kill. Bulgarian burglar with string of offences in homeland is jailed for breaking into house just 8 days after arriving in the UK. UK and China agree £45 million pig semen export deal. German states repeat effort to ban far-right MPD. French prison ordered to serve halal meals. Croatia says no to gay marriage with a wide majority. Nuns kidnapped in Christian Syrian town. Abu Qatada facing Jordanian justice. Australia's immigration minister freezes visas for refugees. Thought for the day, education, location and relocation. And finally, 2 for 1. First, I would like to thank all the comments and signatures on the petition on the article on dogs in China and Korea on the main BNP site. I would like to stress that although the petition was for the Korean embassy, I will be sending that article to the Chinese embassy as well. It wasn't an anti-vegan message, it was a message that although one may eat meat, and I do, it is the method of keeping and slaughter of those animals that was foremost in my mind when writing it. By all means eat meat, but at least try to understand that the killing of any animal in this particularly hideous way is not acceptable in this modern day and age. Cruelty is not a cultural thing, but it may be a genetic thing. The Filipinos and many other nations eat dogs, but just kill them. I needed a large amount of booze to see me through writing this, so appreciate those who looked at it. Thank you again for your support, and my head still hurts. UK news. Lee Rigby killers drove around Woolwich barracks looking for soldiers to kill. Soldier Lee Rigby's killers drove around his Woolwich barracks for up to an hour looking for soldiers to kill before they targeted him, the Old Bailey heard. The blue Vauxhall Tigra Michael Adebolajo and Michael Adebowale were in was captured on CCTV driving up and down Artillery Place from 1:30 p.m. The Fusilier was murdered at around 2:30 p.m. on May the 22nd. The court heard the pair even bought a parking ticket half an hour before the killing, and a copy of the £1 ticket, which was due to expire at 2:53 p.m, was shown to the jury. But by that time the car had crashed into a road sign after being used as a weapon to mow Mr Rigby down. The 25-year-old was then hacked to death with knives and a meat cleaver, so viciously he was almost decapitated before his lifeless body was dragged into the middle of the road. World at 8. They should be prosecuting as well the members of the public who passed by and did nothing, and that policewoman who should have shot to kill that murdering bastard. If he'd been white, all hell would have been let loose by the plods. Alleged murderers, my backside. Bulgarian burglar with string of offences in homeland is jailed for breaking into house just 8 days after arriving in the UK. A Bulgarian burglar who was allowed into the UK, despite having a string of convictions for theft and burglary, has been jailed after he broke into a home just 8 days after arriving in this country. Emil Metodiev, 32, was caught red-handed with items from the burglary in Thorpe Bay, Essex, and pleaded guilty to the break-in earlier this year. He was jailed for 16 months at Basildon Crown Court yesterday. Richard Kelly, prosecuting, said he had only been in the UK for 8 days and had no independent means of income. It is not unreasonable to conclude the reason he came to the UK was to commit crime. World at 8. Mr Kelly, how forbearing of you. It is the main reason he came to the UK, but worse is the fact he was allowed in, like the millions of others. UK and China agree a £45 million pig semen export deal. Half the world's pigs are in China, but the country needs to improve pig genetics. World at 8 states, don't tempt me on that statement. Britain has won the right to export pig semen to China in a deal worth £45 million a year. Owen Paterson, the Environment Secretary, who accompanied David Cameron on his trip to China, has also embarked on negotiations to export pig's trotters, a local delicacy, to China. Under the deal with China, the porcine semen can be flown to the country in frozen and fresh form. Pigs will not be flying, but their seed will take to the air. A Number 10 spokesperson said, "We're doing all we can to ensure that businesses set up and down the country reap the rewards from our relationship with China, and that includes our pig farmers. This new deal to export pig semen will be worth £45 million to UK firms and means Britain's best pigs will help sustain the largest pig population in the world." And we're not stopping there. We're talking to the Chinese about serving up pig's trotters on Beijing's finest dining tables. That would be a real win-win, a multi-million-pound boost for Britain and a gastronomic treat for Chinese diners. World at 8. Don't like the sound of dishing up pig's trotters. No doubt the Chinese would cut them off before the poor bloody pig is dead, or boil the whole pig so the feet are tender. What is wrong with this country? We send live sheep to Arabia so they can be killed by halal, horses to France for their slaughterhouses, and now pig semen. Well, thank God it's just the semen, but I dread to think what can happen to the actual piggy babies. By the way, I love pork. Nothing beats a good bacon sarnie, does it? European news. German states repeat effort to ban far-right NPD. After a failed try in 2003, German officials are again seeking to ban the country's largest far-right party. State leaders plan to file their case soon with Germany's highest court, but it's a controversial move. Germany's National Democratic Party, NPD, is now exploiting any opportunity to raise its profile. It regularly mobilises its members in protests against foreigners and immigration to Germany, while promoting right-wing ideology. Recent examples abound. The group organised a rally this summer against asylum seekers who were taking up residence in a shelter in Berlin's outer Hellersdorf district. During Germany's federal election campaign earlier this year, the NPD distributed condoms to foreigners and selected Germans. Online and at public events, the group voices opposition to parliamentary democracy. The interior ministers of Germany's 16 states say such actions make it obvious that the NPD is in violation of constitutional principles, such as the provision of respect for human dignity. As a result, they've launched a second attempt to ban the party, which is represented in 2 of Germany's state parliaments. A similar effort failed in 2003. World at 8. Good for the NPD. The condoms are brilliant. They should do that here, or rather should have done it 30 years ago. When are the middle-of-the-road people going to stop the far left trying to do away with the far right? Where you allow one, you must allow the other. French prison ordered to serve halal meals. A French court has ordered Saint-Quentin-Favalliere prison near Grenoble in southeastern France to begin making halal meals available to Muslim inmates. It emerged Wednesday, citing detainees' right to free exercise of religion. World at 8. Prisoners don't have any rights by virtue of their crimes. Muslims even less. Croatia says no to gay marriage with a wide majority. Croatia, whose population is mainly Catholic, said a final no to same-sex marriage, including in its constitution a definition of matrimony as a union between a man and a woman. The majority of voters on Sunday, some 65.16%, backed the constitutional change, while 34.23% voted against, according to data released on Sunday night by the Electoral Commission based on 90% of ballots counted. Traditional and Catholic values prevailed over the calls in the past few weeks issued by the government, President and many media outlets and the academic world, who had invited Croatians not to discriminate and divide families as first and second class entities. Members of the movement in the name of family close to the powerful Catholic Church, which promoted the initiative, said nobody would be discriminated because it is a national definition of matrimony which respects reality. The referendum was strongly backed by the Catholic Church, and all bishops in their sermons Sunday had called on the faithful to vote in favour of the Christian definition of marriage. World at 8. I have to agree with this one. Alternative should mean just that, freedom to do it, but the norm prevails. World news. Nuns kidnapped in Christian Syrian town. Nuns at the convent in Malula had been taken hostage by Islamic militants, the Syrian news agency Sana reports, citing local sources. According to these sources, the sisters and Mother Superior, Pelagia Saif from the convent of St Tisia, had been taken hostages by terrorists. The kidnappers have also been reported as having committed vandalism near the convent and around the town, and that there are snipers in Malula, which has a Christian majority population. World at 8. Will there be an outcry from Amnesty or the UN over this one? I doubt it. These poor nuns are Christians, and it is open season on Christians now in the Middle East and Africa. Abu Qatada facing Jordanian justice. Radical Islamist cleric who was deported by Britain in July is due to face terrorism charges in Jordanian court from December the 10th. Radical Islamist cleric Abu Qatada, deported by Britain in July after a near decade-long legal battle, is to go on trial in Jordan, judicial sources said Tuesday. The State Security Court has set next Tuesday, December the 10th, as the date for the first hearing in the trial of Abu Qatada, one source said. Australia's Immigration Minister freezes visas for refugees. Immigration Minister Scott Morrison has been labelled brutal for banning new permanent protection visas. The government has banned new permanent protection visas for asylum seekers already in Australia, slamming the door shut on permanent residency for the 33,000 boat arrivals held in detention centres or on bridging visas. Australia's Daily Telegraph has learnt Immigration Minister Scott Morrison has used powers under Section 85 of the Migration Act to put an immediate cap on permanent protection Class XA visas for asylum seekers who arrived by boat. The legal order was issued yesterday to the Department of Immigration to cease approving PPVs to circumvent the move in the Senate by the Greens and Labour on Monday night to reject the coalition's attempts to revive the Howard-era temporary protection visas. The coalition has hoped to use these visas to deny permanent residency to the 33,000 refugees by applying them retrospectively. But the government has found a way around the Senate roadblock through ministerial powers which can be used to set an annual number on how many visas will be granted in a particular class. World at 8. The land of Oz is now heavily enriched by Asians of every sort and variety, with a plethora of Chinese. So too little, too late, me old possums. Thought for the day: education, location and relocation. My thought today is still with the sodding Chinese, innit? When I saw the write-up that a Chinese paper said we were a small country only fit for tourists and students, I had to laugh. First, because at least I hope we don't slow boil our dogs for food for the rich, and most of the tourists and students that come over here are Chinese. Allow another guffaw for this particular Mongolian journalist, please. Now, in defence of this small island, this little green patch of land is thankfully well away from China and the rest of the dog and cat eating countries, and, being an island up to the time of the Channel, this has served us very well with regard to invasions. Not now, however, and we are, as I have already said, being invaded, but another time and a place for that one. But because we have always been a small country, this has led to a varying disparity in education and the class system, which, although it has shifted, is still with us, even in an adverse reverse aspect. I bring up education because of an article in the Daily Mail today, which highlights what we have known for some time, that Britain's schools are stagnating whilst China's schools are highly successful. But there are reasons for this, and they might not be the ones in the paper. Of course, the DM doesn't touch on the very racist subject that most of China's schools in and just outside their main cities educate just Chinese children. Not Indian, Pakistani, Bangladeshi, Sri Lankan, Saudis, Iraqis, Lebanese, Somalis, Africans and a whole host of Eastern European and Central European tribes, and I'm sure I have left someone out. No, not for the Chinese children, the effort of learning their own history, languages and dialects, religions, or rather the ethos of the Communist Party, whilst all around them are foreigners who have to be, in the words of human rights, educated on a par with our own. Or rather our own are held back, whilst none English speaking or even understanding the language kids are brought up to par. No, I see in front of me a lovely quiet classroom of Chinese children, heads down and working. Blissful. And the paper is quite right. Children in the Far East and China have always had a school ethic and indeed, for the most part, a work ethic. In the last days of colonial Singapore when I lived there, I took a picture with my very new Brownie automatic camera, which I still have. It was of two little Malayan girls, dressed in their long-skirted uniforms, carrying their books, walking up from their campons. Now, to illustrate these campons were wood-built sheds on stilts off the main road, and in those days running water etc. was not on the menu. And yet these two little girls looked clean and were hurrying off to their schools. Now, this illustrates the Eastern ethos, which has not changed during ensuing years. That of the fact that hard work in schools brings prosperity and the ability to look after your parents when older. Now this is a well-known fact that the purpose of education varies from one country to another. Not so in the Far East. It has always meant money and status, and parents are well aware of this, especially in countries under the communist yoke. By getting educated and then going to smaller countries in Europe, staying and working there, you are much more able to send money back home than if you stayed in, say, China and worked in a factory. That is why they work nowadays to escape China, not necessarily to stay there. Tell that to the Chinese Premier Dave and stop crawling. No one, least of all the Chinese, likes crawlers. Tell it as it is. It is all very well to publish figures and pictures that make our education system look bad, but what have we Brits had to put up with over the years with regard to our education systems? A hell of a lot, you might say. Comparisons are odious, it is said, and the same is true for this 2-page spread. Everyone in this country knows that due to class wars inflicted by various governments and authorities after World War II, it was a crime to speak properly if your parents didn't, or they wanted their children to better themselves, and grammar schools and the 11+ were demolished. Would-be teachers were dragged in from God knows where and diversified. Thousands of immigrant families produced thousands of children who all had to go to state or comprehensive schools as they became. Colleges and polytechnics became universities with dubious intakes on dumbed-down exams to bolster the figures, and the words education, manners and standards became the laughing stock of the powers that be. To actually mention to your kids that it would help them in the future world to actually be able to talk to another person and make themselves understood is an advantage that was laughed out of the room, albeit with a huge telly in the corner. The one thing that being an island race has not done for us is the old adage that Jack is as good as his master, when in reality he ain't. Boris the Loris is right insofar not all people are equal in the old brain pan, painful but true. This attitude of not needing an education because you don't want to be posh is an old English tradition and harks back to the days when most of the English or Celtic tribes or whatever farmed or fought. That was the choice for many, the land or the army. For the nobility it was the church or the army. Few children of either status had choices and now they have so many. The things have not really improved. Sure, more people learn to read, but not enough. More people learn to speak English, but not enough. And of course we now have all the electronic gumph made in China, Taiwan, Korea, Bangladesh, etc. that prevents us communicating at all with anyone. And this is what the powers that be want. They do not want a highly educated middle or working class at all. The really old money in this country will always be educated, as in other countries. There has to be a standard not to aspire to nowadays. But the poor old middles and workings have been taken over by the school of common purpose and are in turn giving birth on occasion to more of the same. There was a link sent to me of a woman with 8 children, all by various guys of colour by the look of it, and she'd found her benefits of £580 per week go down due to cuts to £500 per week. She was in arrears for her council house and in debt with the cards out of the wazoo. Now, as you all know, I am not an economic genius by any means, but when a single mother, oh God, I really hate that term when divorced and widowed, it looks like you're rather careless, doesn't it? But I digress. I was not perfect by any means, and on the odd occasion I bought something for myself and not for my children, I justified it with the fact I was working and had to look good. So much for tiger mothers. But if I'd had even £200 a week coming in without working, I would have been laughing all the way to the bank. As it was, I didn't, and made around £720 per month after tax in the mid-80s. I paid my mortgage, bills and ran a small jalopy. My kids were fed, but there was nothing left for extravagant toys or trainers which were just coming into fashion. Luckily, all the electrical crap that children must have nowadays didn't exist. But this woman is clearly rather odd, and there are many like her, who don't realise the value of unearned money, and I would like to bet she spends thousands on Christmas crap for those children, when a good educational ethos would do them much better, or at least not have them turn out like her. So our education systems are not good, we know that. All the choices that used to be governed by money and status are not even in existence now, even to be choices. Education is not high on most Brits' lists. Houses, cars, clothes, holidays and practically anything that involves spending money on crap is. And it is deliberate, this grooming of the British people to believe that education is an option for children and not a necessity for their future. Try telling the average British child when they're 10 that what they learn and do for the next 6 to 8 years will denote the rest of their lives and the lives of their dependents, and they will jeer and revert back to their mobiles. It isn't a priority anymore, and it is the deliberate actions of our governments to dumb down the masses to suit the few. It is a form of Marxism which, unlike Chinese communism, does not promote the thought of education to get out of it. Once in our state systems, if you are not foreign or in a good catchment area, you have virtually had it. Imagine the average inner London white youth or girl, and we do have a few left, aged 13 in the local comp. If they're lucky, there'll be a few whiteys there, but not a lot. A group of shabby, disillusioned teachers who are afraid to inflict any sorts of standards or punishments, teaching the rest of the world their cultures as if they've forgotten them in the few short years they've been over here. No games, no gym, no religious education, well Christian that is, little history that has not been airbrushed, and a crowning desire to accommodate in thought and deed the rest of the world's culture, history and pupils. Put this with the patois of African, West Indian and Asian languages and cat within it, and there we have it, British citizen of the 21st century, come on down. Of course there is a strong educational ethos in Poland and the rest of the world. Schools are not meant to be fun places for free expression, they are workhouses, and it's right to be afraid of teachers and treat them with respect. The odd wallop with a cane on the back of the legs or bum wouldn't hurt. Although this punishment is now on the list of so vile and pedos, and the thought of actually striking back a student who attacks you is truly awful to teachers in the UK now. I would like to see a student strike a Chinese, Pole or French teacher and see what happens. In the good old days I was more frightened of my mother's reaction had I been really foul, but I was mainly educated in the convent and frankly, despite all the rantings of bad nuns and even worse priests by the press, those days were the happiest of my life. Order, discipline and awful food were the order of the day. But when I moved to private school in another town, the difference was startling and truly terrible, and it took years for me to settle. Rather like national service, a good education should not be enjoyed too much. Too much freedom results in an overall loss of freedom and death by ignorance. Discipline is passed down from generation to generation, and when children see ignorant behaviour, an irrational use of money and a definitely odd sort of priorities, then they will think that that is the norm, when in fact it is not. Our country needs more discipline, not a lessening of standards or morals in the education market. We need to start to cater to our own children and their needs for the future, not encourage the Chinese or any other race to come over and be educated above our own. The British National Party would instil a new learning era for education, which would push our children to the fore once again. And you would have to start with the parents, as it is the branch bent. It has to be said that the ethos of a good education should not be the mindset of the wealthy or privileged only, and in days of old mainly grammar school children on the 11+ did very well for themselves, and they came from neither the wealthy or privileged homes. But they did have a choice to work or not to work, and they chose to work, and bloody hard work at that. My hat off to that generation. The word should go out. Schools are not holiday camps or places to spend time when you aren't walking the streets, drinking, taking drugs or whatever. You can do all that when you're grown up properly. Can't let the Chinese have the last word, can we? And finally, 2 for 1. An embarrassing number of Britons cannot tell the difference between the UK's landmarks and those situated in foreign countries, research suggests. More than half of us, 55%, confuse the Lake District's wastewater lake with Lake Geneva in Switzerland, while Portsmouth's Spinnaker Tower is believed by 48% to be in Dubai. Bristol's Clifton Suspension Bridge, designed by the Victorian architect Isambard Kingdom Brunel, is misidentified by 1 in 10 Londoners as San Francisco's Golden Gate Bridge. The poll of 2,000 UK adults by First Great Western, the train operator, also found that Christ Church College, one of Oxford University's best-known institutions, is thought to be in France by 16% of Britons, while the world-famous open-air Minack Theatre in Porthcurno, Cornwall, is believed to be in Athens, Greece, by almost a third, that's 32%. Appletree Bay, a picturesque spot in the Isles of Scilly, was located by 30% in the Maldives instead. Almost 1 in 10 attributed images of the Isles of Scilly to East London's Isle of Dogs. Philip Edgerton, head of marketing at First Great Western, said, "We live in a fantastic country, but this research shows that many of us simply aren't aware of the amazing places on our doorstep, just waiting to be discovered." Previous research by Travelodge found that 1/3 of Britons mistook the Roman-built Hadrian's Wall for the Great Wall of China. More than half confused London's Trafalgar Square for a Spanish or Portuguese piazza, and a similar number were unable to identify London's Canary Wharf, instead mistaking it for New York City's skyline. This presenter says, "I'm glad they're using the terms Britons and Londoners, as we all know most of them will not be actually English, so I don't think these results are all that bad really. Now for an adult laugh, so remove the children please." A guy and a girl met at a bar. They get along so well they decide to go to the girl's place. A few drinks later the guy takes off his shirt and then washes his hands. He then takes off his trousers and again washes his hands. The girl's been watching him and says, "You must be a dentist." The guy, surprised, says, "Yes, but how do you figure that out?" "Easy," she replies, "you keep washing your hands." One thing leads to another and they make love. After it's over the girl says, "You must be a good dentist." The guy, now with an inflated ego, says, "Sure, I'm a good dentist. How'd you figure that out?" The girl replies, "Didn't feel a thing." You've been listening to The World at 8. I am Lynn Mozart and I wish you all a very good night.